Marcus Ellison was 41 years old when he walked into his wife's company party and decided, for the first time in 11 years of marriage, to stop being invisible. For 9 years, he had been the quiet man behind Priya Ellison, the husband who drove her to industry events and waited in the car, who ironed her blazers without being asked, who made her lunch every morning in a reusable container with a small note inside that she stopped reading somewhere around year 4. He was a project manager at a mid-size logistics firm in Columbus, Ohio. A man who drove a 2016 Kia Sorento with a cracked rear bumper and knew every shortcut between their house and the Whole Foods. Priya's colleagues called him Pleasant Marcus. She never corrected them. What they didn't know, what Priya herself had never once thought to ask, was that Marcus Ellison held an 80% ownership stake in the company that paid every single salary in that banquet hall. She had filed for divorce 2 weeks earlier, citing incompatibility, citing his limitations. The word she used with her mother on a phone call Marcus was not supposed to overhear was beneath. What happened at that party would cost Priya Chandler Ellison everything she had spent 11 years building on a foundation she never once bothered to examine. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The alarm went off at 5:12 a.m. on a Tuesday in October, and Marcus Ellison was already awake. He had been awake since 4:30, lying on his back in the guest room, his room for the past 3 weeks, since Priya had made it clear, without quite saying so, that the bed was no longer shared. Staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked vaguely like the state of Indiana, he had been meaning to fix it for 2 years. He never did. There was always something else. He got up without making noise. That was habit. 11 years of a light sleeper beside him had trained him into a kind of domestic silence that had become, somewhere along the way, his default mode. He moved through the dark kitchen in socked feet, filled the kettle by feel, and stood at the window while it heated, watching the neighbor's orange tabby cat pick its way along the fence line in the gray pre-dawn like it owned every inch of the world it touched. He made pour over coffee, 2 cups, out of habit. He poured the second one out. He had built this house, not literally, though he had installed the deck himself the summer Priya was in Singapore for a conference, had framed it out with treated lumber, sunk the posts in concrete, and finished it before she came back so she could walk out the back door and find it already there, already done. He meant it as a gift. She said, "Oh, you did that yourself?" Not unkindly, just with the particular tone of someone registering information they had not requested. Marcus Ellison was a builder. He always had been. At 14, he had fixed his mother's vac unit with a YouTube tutorial and a set of tools he'd bought at a garage sale. At 22, fresh out of Ohio State with an engineering degree he'd paid for himself, loans, work study. 2 years at a community college first to save money, he had taken a job at a mid-size logistics firm and done it so quietly and so well that within 4 years he was running 3 regional accounts. Externally, he remained a project manager. That was the title. It had not changed in 6 years. Not because he hadn't been offered more, but because he had declined. He liked the work. He did not care about the letterhead. What his colleagues did not know, what Priya did not know, because she had never asked, and Marcus had never seen a reason to offer it, was that Ellison Group, LLC, a private holding company registered in Delaware in 2015, owned 80% of the parent company that employed them both, including the logistics firm, including Priya's marketing agency, including the banquet hall they had booked for the company's annual gala. His father had started the holding company. Terrence Ellison, who had spent 30 years quietly accumulating commercial real estate, small business stakes, and private equity positions across the Midwest. A man who drove a 2009 Buick LeSabre and ate lunch from a cooler he packed every morning at 6 a.m. And who, when he died in 2017, left Marcus Holdings worth just under $40 million and a note on yellow legal paper that said, "Move carefully and move completely." Marcus had moved carefully. He had transferred the ownership, restructured the entities with his attorneys, and continued going to work every morning in the same Kia Sorento. He had not told Priya. He had not told anyone. He did not think of it as hiding anything. He simply never announced himself. He had never needed to. Priya Chandler Ellison was the kind of person who needed a room to know she had arrived in it. She was good at her job, genuinely good. The kind of creative director who could walk into a pitch meeting and read the room in 4 seconds and pivot the entire presentation without notes. Marcus had always respected that about her. He had spent the first 6 years of their marriage admiring her from the particular angle of someone who loves a person completely and assumes the admiration is mutual. It was somewhere around year 7 that he had noticed the angle shifting. It was not dramatic. It never was. It was the comment she made at dinner with her colleagues about how she had practically supported them both through his career stall. Said lightly, laughing, her hand on his arm, her eyes already moving to the next conversation that he had absorbed without speaking. It was the way she described him to her mother. He's steady. You know. Reliable. Safe. The pause before safe, the particular vocal inflection that wrapped safe in quotation marks and set it down like a verdict. It was the phone call he heard from the living room 3 months ago. Her voice low, but not low enough, talking to someone named Divya, and the words, "She has limits, and I think I've reached mine," arriving through the walls of the house he built around both of them. He had set down his book. He had sat very still. He had not made a scene. He had not confronted her. He had driven to work the next morning in the Kia, clipped his badge to his belt, and sat in his office for 45 minutes doing nothing at all before he picked up the phone and called his attorney. Her name was Sandra O'Kay. She had gone to Michigan law and had spent 20 years handling high-asset cases in Ohio and Pennsylvania, and she had a reputation, among the attorneys who knew her and the clients who had faced her, for a particular quality of calm that other people mistook for softness, until the moment the documents hit the table. Marcus had walked into her office on a Wednesday at noon, closed the door, and laid out the situation in 6 minutes. His marriage, the holding company, the divorce filing Priya had served him the previous Tuesday, the employment situation, the gala. Sandra had listened without interrupting. When he finished, she set down her pen and looked at him for a moment. She said, "You understand that she has almost certainly obtained a financial discovery request that will require disclosure of all marital assets." Marcus said, "I do." She said, "And you're prepared for that." He said, "That's why I'm here." She leaned back in her chair. "This is the most complete financial asymmetry I've encountered in 11 years of high-asset divorce practice." A pause, and she filed first. Marcus nodded. Sandra picked up her pen. "Then, let's talk about the gala." The Chandler Marketing Annual Gala was held on the first Saturday of November at a venue Priya had personally selected, a renovated warehouse space on the east side of Columbus that had been converted into a ballroom 6 years ago. She had written the venue selection into the event proposal herself. She had mentioned it to Marcus in passing, the way she mentioned most things now, as information being relayed rather than shared. What she had not mentioned, because it had not occurred to her to check, because she had never thought to ask, was that the venue was among the commercial real estate holdings that Ellison Group LLC had acquired in 2019. Marcus had not corrected the omission. He had noted it, filed it, and gotten his shoes shined. He arrived at 7:14 p.m., alone, in a dark charcoal suit he had not worn in 2 years and had pressed himself that afternoon, the kind of suit that fit well enough to be noticed and understated enough not to announce itself. He drove the Kia. He parked in the second row. He walked through the main entrance and accepted a glass of sparkling water from a passing server and stood near the windows for 11 minutes, watching the room. The room was full. He knew many of the people in it, knew them as colleagues, as names on organizational charts, as faces from holiday parties. He knew some of them as something else entirely. He spotted Priya across the room at 7:26 p.m. She was wearing a dress he had not seen before, deep green, and her hair was up, and she was laughing at something the man beside her had said. The man was tall and worked in business development, and had, over the past 4 months, begun appearing in Priya's schedule with an increasing frequency that she had not bothered to conceal because she did not think Marcus would notice. His name was Derek Holt. He had a confident handshake and an Emba from Northwestern, and a leased Audi A6 that he parked in the same lot as Priya's company car 3 times a week. Marcus watched them for a moment. Then he turned and walked toward the far end of the room, where the company's CEO was standing with a small cluster of executives. The CEO's name was Raymond Chow. Marcus had known Raymond Chow for 4 years, not as his employee's husband, though he was that too. As the controlling stakeholder of the parent company that had brought Raymond on in 2021 to run the day-to-day operations. They had spoken on the phone that Thursday. They had agreed on the approach. Raymond saw Marcus coming and extended a hand without breaking the conversation. Then, smoothly and without ceremony, he turned to the group and said, "I don't know if everyone has had the chance to meet Marcus Ellison. He's the majority shareholder of Ellison Group. They're our parent company." The sentence landed quietly. Marcus shook hands. He nodded at the questions. He was pleasant and specific and entirely unhurried. 3 of the executives in the cluster, 2 VPs and the company's CFO, registered the information with the particular stillness of people rearranging a room in their minds while trying not to look like they're doing it. Across the ballroom, Priya Chandler Ellison was refilling her champagne glass when she heard a name. She turned. She saw her husband standing in a cluster of senior executives, Raymond Chow's hand on his shoulder, speaking to the company's CFO with the ease of someone who had sat in many rooms like this one, and had never once needed to announce himself to be the most important person in it. She stood very still. Her champagne glass was full. She did not drink from it. She had met Marcus Ellison at a marketing conference in Cincinnati 11 years ago. He had been wearing a name badge for a logistics company, and he had asked her a question about her presentation, and she had answered it, and then spent 40 minutes talking to him, because he had the particular quality of listening that made you feel like your words were landing somewhere. Real. She had thought, on the drive home, that he was the most quietly intelligent person she had ever met. She had not thought about what that quality might be protecting. She had not thought to ask. She crossed the room. She did this carefully, holding her champagne, stopping twice to speak to colleagues so it would not look like what it was, which was a woman navigating toward a point she could not yet see the shape of. She reached the cluster as the CFO was laughing at something Marcus had said. She stepped to his side. She put her hand on his arm the way she had always done in public, automatic and light. Marcus looked at her. His face was composed. He said, pleasantly, "Priya, do you know Raymond?" She said, carefully, "Of course. Raymond, good to see you." Raymond said, "Your husband was just telling me about the Delaware restructuring. Fascinating timing." He smiled. It was a professional smile, the kind that does not reach the eyes because it is not trying to. "You must be very proud." Priya said, "Yes." The word came out smaller than she intended. The CFO excused himself. Raymond followed. There was a moment, a specific physical moment, where the ambient noise of the ballroom filled the space between Marcus and Priya like water into a room, and she understood, for the first time, that the water was not new. It had always been there. She simply had not known to look for the walls. She said quietly, "What is this?" Marcus said, "It's the gala." She said, "Marcus." He looked at her. His expression was not unkind. It was not cruel. It was the face of a man who has decided to let a thing be exactly what it is. He said, "You filed divorce papers 2 weeks ago. You cited incompatibility." He paused. "That was your word for it." She was quiet. He said, "Sandra Oke will be sending updated financial disclosures to your attorney on Monday morning. Everything will be documented. All of it." He picked up his sparkling water. "I think you'll want to review them carefully before the next proceeding." He did not wait for her response. He excused himself to greet a VP from the Northeast Division he had not seen in 8 months, and he shook the man's hand, and he smiled at the joke the man made about Ohio winters, and he was entirely present and entirely unhurried, and Priya watched him from across the ballroom the way you watch a city you thought you knew and discover, standing in the wrong street, at the wrong hour, that you were never inside it at all. Sandra Oke filed the full financial disclosure on Monday at 9:00 a.m. Priya's attorney, a sharp and experienced divorce litigator named Carl Weiss, called Sandra at 9:47 a.m. The call lasted 19 minutes. He called back at 11:15 a.m. for 14 more minutes. He called a third time at 2:30 p.m. And the conversation lasted 41 minutes, and by the end of it, he had requested a full copy of every holding document. The Ellison Group LLC Articles of Organization, the trust instruments, the Delaware Certificate of Formation dated 2015, and the 2017 estate transfer documentation. By Wednesday, Carl Weiss had advised his client to reconsider her position. By Thursday, Priya had a conversation with her mother that lasted 1 hour and 22 minutes and that she did not tell anyone about. The full disclosure revealed $41 million in assets, spanning commercial real estate across 3 states, equity positions in 7 companies, including the parent company of the marketing firm where Priya had worked for 6 years, and a trust structure that had been established before the marriage, managed cleanly, and maintained in a manner that made any claim of marital commingling extraordinarily difficult to establish. Ohio is an equitable distribution state. The premarital trust was airtight. The marital property, the house, the joint accounts, the mutual investments, was straightforward and already documented. Priya had been awarded, in her own mind, a settlement that would allow her to start over. A clean break. A new life funded by what she had always assumed was a joint financial position that marginally favored her because she earned slightly more in salary. She had been, for 11 years, the higher earner in the marriage. She had said so. Not cruelly, always. Sometimes, not cruelly at all, but she had said so. She had never asked what else there was. The settlement negotiation took 11 days. Marcus attended 2 sessions. He was polite and quiet, and brought documents in a leather portfolio that Sandra placed on the table in specific order, and when Carl Weiss made a claim that was not supported by the evidence, Sandra simply slid the relevant document across the table and waited. Marcus did not look at Priya during the sessions, not because he was avoiding her, because there was nothing there that required him to look. The settlement was finalized on the 14th day. Marital assets divided equitably. The house listed for sale. The joint accounts settled. Priya received a fair and specific figure that was meaningful and that was, at the same time, exactly what the law indicated it should be, no more. Because there was no legal basis for more, because the premarital trust held, because the documentation was exact. Her attorney submitted a single request for spousal support consideration. It was reviewed and declined based on the income disparity that had in fact favored Priya for 6 of the 9 taxable years in the marriage. Marcus signed the final documents at 3:00 p.m. on a Thursday. He drove home in the Kia. He parked in the driveway. He sat with the engine off for a moment, listening to the tick of cooling metal in the quiet. Then he got out, went inside, and made himself dinner. Priya moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in Clintonville in December. It was a nice apartment. She could afford it. She continued working at the marketing firm. She had expected, at some point, to not work at a company owned by her former husband. She had expected this to be a condition of the settlement, or a development that would follow from it. It was neither. Marcus did not remove her. He did not suggest it. He did not communicate with her about it at all. She remained employed because she was good at her job, and because his interest in the company was financial rather than personal, and because he was not interested in her professional life any more than she had been interested in his. She found this, somehow, harder to carry than anything else. Derek Holt accepted a position at a firm in Chicago in February and moved without significant ceremony. He and Priya had dinner twice after the settlement was finalized. The second dinner ended with him saying something about timing and her saying something back, and neither of them calling the other after that. Her mother called every Sunday. Her friends checked in with the particular frequency of people managing their own discomfort. She was not without support. She was not broken. She was simply a person who had built a picture of a life and lived inside it for 11 years and had, only now, thought to look at the frame. She had met a man at a conference and listened to him and thought, he is quietly intelligent. She had never thought to ask what the quiet was protecting. She did not call Marcus. She had his number. She sometimes thought about what she would say if she did. She never found the sentence. Marcus Ellison bought a house on the west side of Columbus in March. It was a 1940s craftsman on a quiet street with original hardwood floors he stripped and refinished himself. Working 3 hours every evening after dinner, the smell of polyurethane sitting in the kitchen for 2 weeks until the windows were warm enough to open. He rebuilt the back porch from sagging composite wood to proper tongue and groove cedar planks, measured and cut and fitted himself over a long weekend in April. He designed a set of custom built-ins for the living room, drew them out on graph paper, and installed them over the course of 6 evenings in May. His neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Dolores, brought him a casserole in April and stood on the porch watching him measure a board and said, "You do all this yourself?" He said, "Most of it." She said, "You're handy." He said, "I find it useful to know how things work." He did not take meetings on Saturdays. He reserved them for the house. He would wake at 6 a.m. and make pour-over coffee, 1 cup now, no second cup poured and wasted, and sit on the back porch while it was still cool and drink it slowly, not checking his phone, watching the yard, which was overgrown, and which he was working through systematically, 1 section at a time. There was a lot of work still to do. He liked having work to do. Sandra Oke called him in June to relay that Carl Weiss had inquired, on behalf of a different client, whether Ellison Group was interested in a commercial property near downtown. Marcus asked her to tell Carl Weiss to send the terms in writing, He did not think often about the gala. When he did, he thought about it the way you think about a thing that could not have gone any other way, not with satisfaction, not with anger, just with the recognition that it had been exactly what it was. He had not hidden from Priya. He had simply never announced himself. He had driven to work in the same Kia for years and made her lunch and fixed what needed fixing and built what needed building. And she had looked at all of it and made her decision, and the decision was that this was not enough. That he was not enough. She had built that picture. She had lived inside it for 11 years. She had never once thought to check if it was real. He carried his coffee inside when it started to cool. He rinsed the cup. He had a section of trim in the hallway that still needed painting, and the light was good this morning, and he had time. He picked up the brush. He started at the top, which was always the right place to start. He did not look back. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.